Welcome to the Stewardship Sessions, the podcast where money meets meaning. Here, we talk about building wealth with wisdom, shaping a mindset rooted in purpose, and pursuing a mission guided by faith. I'm your host, Jason Stanley, and together we'll explore intentional living, one conversation at a time.
Hey, welcome back. Well, we're getting into that time of year where we're coming up to the holiday season, Christmas. You know, we just came through Thanksgiving. Hopefully you guys had a great Thanksgiving, ate too much food, all that good stuff, but hopefully you stopped it after that. Remember what we've talked about throughout the year about compounding returns. You keep eating too much food, it'll compound sooner or later. But no, as we go into the Christmas season, Christmas brings up a lot of emotions for people. And it brings up good emotions for some. For some, it's point of frustration. It's point of depression, and that kind of stuff. And in our society, and it's been like this for a long, long time. It's nothing new, but our society is very materialistic about this time of year, right? Again, it's all about what can I have and what can I get and that kind of stuff. And we enjoy, giving gifts to other people and stuff like that. But, the real truth of the matter is, one, it's not about giving gifts to other people. It's about receiving a gift, right? At the end of the day, this was the world receiving the best gift in the world, right? It's the person of God manifested through Jesus Christ. And so, there's a couple activities that I try to keep in our family. There's a couple things that we try to do. We got away from giving a lot of gifts to each other and to the kids and so on and so forth. It's not because we don't love our kids. We love our kids. We started a couple of years ago. It's actually been probably about 10 years ago. Instead of giving gifts, we started giving experiences, right? Times for us to go spend time together as a family. I read some studies on what kids desire most, and contrary to popular belief, it's not stuff, it's time. They want your time and your attention more than they want anything else. And I'm not always the best at doing that. I would say that's one area that I struggle in, just because of no excuses. It's just an area that I struggle in. And so I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind, and one of the previous podcasts that I did with John Prescott, if you remember, we started talking about tithing, and in that conversation around tithing, one of the things that we do every year is we write out our final tithe to our church. And when we do that, I write the check out, and this is something that we only do as a family. We write the check out. I bring my kids out. We sit down. We look at the check. They talk about the amount that it is. We talk about the stuff that we could purchase with it, but we talk about why we're doing what we're doing out of obedience, right? Because we're told to give. We're told to have that mentality, to have that abundant outlook, and to give from that position of abundance, not begrudgingly or anything like that. And it's interesting because it is the only activity in the entire Bible that God says to test Him in. He says, "Test me in this. If you tithe, if you do what I command you to do, if you're giving of your resources, see if I don't give you more than you could handle." Right? And He doesn't mean in a bad way. He's talking about in a good way, right? See if I don't fill up your life in ways that you never thought. And so it is the only area in the Bible that God says to test Him in it. And so it's something that's become important to me in being obedient. And so when we do that process and we sit down with our kids, we then pray about it, and we pray that God will use our piddly resources that we give, right? Because in the greater scheme of things, it's such a minute amount. While it's a lot to us, it's not. to God. He doesn't really need our money anyway. It's just a point of obedience. But we pray that God uses that for his benefit and for his glory. And that starts to shape our mentality around Christmas. I think doing that activity, and we've only done it now for a couple of years. This isn't something that I've been doing for a very long time. This is something that I came up with that I thought was good because I wanted my children to see me being obedient to God, and I wanted them to see, the outcome of that in my life, right? Not that I expect to be able to give money and get money back in return or any of that stuff, but I wanted them to see the joy and the peace that I live with of knowing that I'm being obedient. And so for those of you who have a relationship with God and have that belief, it's something that I highly recommend doing because it does change your perspective on things. And what better time of year to start changing perspective than the time of the Christmas season when everything starts to feel chaotic. You got families coming over. Never mind if you get in political debates at your family dinners or, religious debates or whatever they are, right? Families are always kind of fun and interesting, right? Because we have such different personalities and stuff. You become worried about what food you got to cook or who's going to bring what or what gifts you got to buy and who's going to, what you're going to get and so on and so forth. And maybe you're in a place where, financially Christmas is hard, right? Maybe it's hard, because you can't necessarily get your kids what you want to be able to get them or, and that kind of stuff. And so I think finding something that you can center your family around this time of year, and center them around in that mindset of, this isn't about us getting, this is about us receiving, right? It's about us receiving God's grace, through his son. And when you shape the focus around Christmas, the holidays, around that one key element, it changes how you look at it. I look forward to Christmas every year. I love putting up a Christmas tree. I love the Christmas lights and all that stuff. I don't look forward to it in terms of the gifts I get. I don't even look forward to it in terms of the gifts that I get to give. I just look forward to it as a time to be spending with my family. And maybe you don't have a family to spend time with right now, right? But there's plenty of things that you can get involved in. There's plenty of places for people to connect and that kind of stuff. We've tried to always instill in our children this idea of, we are a steward of what God has given us. Like I talked about in the last episode, we're a steward of what God has given us. And so as a good steward, our job is to bless those and bless the world around us. And again, we don't do it right all the time. I'm screwed up from time to time, quite often actually. Get frustrated with certain things and that kind of stuff. But, we've gone out and we've done, gotten involved with different charities where we, will go out and deliver presents and stuff to, the less fortunate, or families that need stuff, and that kind of stuff. I've got a good client that builds bicycles, for kids at the local schools who, probably aren't going to get anything for Christmas. And he builds hundreds of bicycles, goes and buys them, puts them together, and they go deliver them to these kids at the schools and stuff like that. And, I would say the interesting thing about doing stuff like that is you don't have to be somebody that's got a ton of resources to go do that. You just have to have the desire to go do it. And I think when you look at Christmas and this season is how do I impact the world around me? How do I bring joy to somebody else rather than seeking joy for myself? It becomes it becomes what it's supposed to be. What Christmas is supposed to be about. It's, feeding into others and that type of thing. Again, it's easy to get wrapped up in the materialistic side. Good Lord, I hate watching those Black Friday videos of people fighting over junk. It's an absurdity. If you're watching this channel and you go do that, stop, because it's stupid. Either that or go see a psychologist. There's something wrong with you. It's just absurd, but it's also a great example of the dichotomy of what Christmas really can be about, right? You have these two diametrically opposed ideas, where Christmas is supposed to be about the gift of Christ that God gave us, right? And the grace that he's showing us, and the forgiveness that he's showing us. And then you have this just completely diametrically opposed idea of, consumerism and selfishness and greed. Kind of all the reasons why God sent his son, right? Is all the reasons that he sent his son is for exactly what we see played out in some of these Black Friday videos of people fighting over a PlayStation or whatever the heck they're fighting over now. I saw one video where people were fighting over Pokemon cards. And I think, how crazy is that? Like, the season that we receive God's grace and gifts and forgiveness through his son is also the season where we see people the most selfish and inward focus that we've seen it. And so I think it's a time period that we have to guard ourselves against. I think it's a time period that we have to guard our hearts, we have to guard our minds, we have to make sure that we have the right outlook, because it's so easy to fall into that, of what can I get? What is everybody going to give me? Look at this, or I want that, or, that kind of stuff. And we fall into the consumeristic mentality around it. And look, there's nothing wrong with giving and receiving gifts. I think it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to be able to give. It's fun to be able to receive. It's, fun to open a present and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think you have to really watch where your mindset's at, because, it can lead to frustrations and depression and so on and so forth, because you start comparing, right? It's easy to start comparing. Well, so-and-so got their kids this, and I can't afford that, or it's easy to compare, well, I got this, I wish I'd gotten that, and that kind of stuff. And instead, refocusing on what the true meaning of Christmas is about, and what it stands for. And, I think one of the great ways to do that is to try to get involved in something and try to help people around you. Right? Maybe it's that you take food to somebody's house that they're struggling. Maybe it's that you quietly, not in a big boastful way, right? I'm not a fan of, going, hey, look at what I give, look what I do, and all that stuff. I'll talk to you guys about tithing and stuff like that. If you notice, I'm not going to talk to you about the amounts. I'm not going to talk to you about, those kinds of things, because I don't want that to be about me. That's just something that we do because that we want to be obedient to God's word but I think, you could even go drop stuff off to somebody and keep it to yourself. Maybe you volunteer, you go, work in a soup kitchen or something like that. There's a lot of great programs out there. Again, if you don't have to go start your own, there's a lot of great programs that you can get involved in and make somebody's life, make an impact in somebody's life. And you may never even get to meet the person, which I think is even more amazing in my opinion. Sometimes when we do things in private and the way it affects people's lives, you don't know what that's going to translate into, you don't know, maybe that person becomes the, that little kid that you brought joy to their life. They go on and do amazing things in this world, right? Change the world. All because you simply cared. And it's that butterfly effect, right? We hear about the butterfly effect, the idea that butterfly flaps its wings and halfway around the world it creates a tornado or a hurricane, right? Disrupts that much airflow. I don't know if that's true, but I do know that our actions have ripple effects, and we don't ever really get to see the full outcome of our actions. And so, I always try to be mindful of that in life, is that, if I help somebody, or if I'm doing something that's affecting lives, I always pray that leads to something even greater, that, like I said, you never know. You may affect somebody's life or some child's life in a way that later impacts the world in a positive way. They go on to cure diseases or whatever, the sky's really the limit on it. But we just don't ever know. And our job is to, again, be that conduit, and really just be obedient to God and God's word, and give of our time, our resources, of our energy, right? I've talked about that now in these last two episodes, and throughout the whole year, we've talked about giving in order to receive, not as a means of, I guess I'll give and then I'll expect to get this back. I don't think it works like that. I think it's one of those things that when you focus on changing the world around you, when you focus on trying to help people become the best versions of themselves, when you focus on, impacting people's lives in a positive way, I think that it comes back. And I think a lot of times it comes back simply as just fulfillment. And at Christmas time, it can be really hard for some people to feel fulfilled, because it is such it has become very consumeristic in focus, right? We focus on the stuff, we focus on the junk and all this other stuff. We focus on all the wrong things about it, when in actuality it should be a time of peace and fulfillment in our lives. And again, I'm not saying any of you are doing it wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as general, I look at society and I, kind of cringe every once in a while, going, man, I wish people would, look at this a little bit differently. But also too, one simple thing you can do is, and we've talked about this before, is be thankful, right? Like I said, I talked about this on some of the earlier episodes. I start my day and my day with what I'm thankful for. I'm ever amazed that I can never finish all the things that I'm thankful for before I fall asleep, right? I'm kind of reminded of, when I say that, I'm kind of reminded of the disciples in the garden with Christ before Christ was to be taken to be crucified. If you remember, they were falling asleep praying, and I remember reading that story and thinking, well, that's just stupid. How are they falling asleep? They must not have cared or something like that. No. I do it all the time. I literally have so much in my life to be thankful for, right? And when you start naming those things, and maybe it's as simple as thank you for the food I got to eat today, right? Or thank you for, a comfortable pair of new socks or something like that. You start thanking God individually for the things that you have in your life, the abundance that you have in your life, because most people in this country truly do have abundance, even those who don't think that they do. We all have something we can be thankful for, and when you start naming them, I'm ever amazed that I can never get through it in the morning. I can never get through it at night. Everything that I'm thankful for, I either have to go out of the door, go to a meeting, or I fall asleep before I finish. And I guess that's a good problem to have, is to, have that many things to be thankful for in my life. But I think if you start with that's a really simple exercise is, starting your day, ending your day with what you're thankful for. And what better time of year to start it than right now as we go into Christmas. And, we're looking at the greatest gift that was ever given to the world. And, the salvation that we have through Christ and stuff. What better time to be thankful, right? And so if you start with that simple behavior of just each morning, do it with your kids, do it with your family. If you don't have that, do it by yourself, and see what that does to your mindset. See what kind of joy that brings to your life. And again, it's not a mystical thing. A lot of the stuff, some people think, laws of attraction and all this other stuff. What I'll tell you in that light is most of this is just how our minds are wired, and our minds are really a feedback system, right? And so when you start to say things that you're thankful for, you're literally changing how you're looking at everything around you. And you start to see the abundance around you. You start to see the good around you, right? You're shifting your focus from the things that are negative over to the things that are good. And so, again, I don't see this as a mystical system of sorts. I don't think you're going to write down something and just imagine and it's going to show up at your door, that kind of stuff. But I think that when you approach the world from a position of abundance and thankfulness, right? You tend to see those things. We've talked about this in previous episodes of, the reticular activating system part of the brain filters out all the non-essential information, that kind of stuff. When you start focusing on what you're thankful for, you're actually programming that into your mind, and you start to realize how much more you have. And it's funny because it becomes that feedback loop of, I have way more than what I thought I had. And so it can start as simple as, like I said, maybe you're thankful for a comfortable pair of new socks or something, something as basic as that. And then suddenly you start going, oh, well, I'm also thankful for this. And you go, well, wait, I got this too, and then it starts to just build on itself and starts to build momentum, and that kind of stuff. But at this time of year, at Christmas and stuff, I think it's very important for us to focus on what we're thankful for us to give thanks to God for what we have been given, the gifts that we've been given in this life, and for where we're at, one of my personal beliefs has always been you're always right where you're supposed to be. And sometimes when life gets really hard and things don't seem to be going your direction, like I've said, changing the way you ask those questions of why is this happening to me, and saying why is this happening for me, but also living in the peace of knowing that you're always right where you're supposed to be. And maybe that place isn't a very good place for you right now. Maybe it's a phenomenal place for you. I don't know. But I think when you look at life in those terms and you say, I'm right where I'm supposed to be, right? You now open yourself up to receive God's grace. You receive God's blessings in your life. And again, it's not easy. It's hard to do. There's a lot of times in life I failed at doing it. And I have to very quickly try to figure out how to get to that mindset and that kind of stuff. So, but again, in a season that is so focused on selfish desires and materialistic things and consumerism and stuff, I think if there's one thing that I can encourage everybody to do and encourage myself to do, it's to refocus and reframe that and start with giving thanks for what we have. And then, how do we bring joy to other people's lives? How do we exemplify, the example that Christ gave us in our world? How do we become that kind of person that brings joy and peace to other people's lives? And I think when you shift the focus of the Christmas holiday to that, I think it suddenly becomes a lot more fulfilling. And a lot more exciting. And so, like I said, I get excited about Christmas every year because I look forward to the time that I get to spend with my family. I look forward to going through some of these exercises with my kids. I get excited about that process because, I see it as one, teaching them, but also two, it gets them excited about it. And I hope that I'm teaching the next generation how to improve the way that we approach this season than where we currently sit. With all that said, I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Thanks for sticking with me through this year. It's our first year doing this. It's just something that I've had a desire to do for a long time. It's interesting to try to do at times because I think, I really don't know all that much. So hopefully you found some usefulness out of this year. I look forward to this next year coming up. But I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. God bless to you and your family. And I look forward to talking to you guys in the new year.